that ye may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. We've just read in Matthew chapter number 5, verse number 45, God tells us that both the just and the unjust face storms. Rain comes to everybody. We won't take time to look at it, but when you look at Acts chapter number 27, you come into the story of the Apostle Paul on a ship, and they face a storm called Euroclydon. It's a very strong storm, and many people thought they were going to die in the midst of that storm. Matter of fact, the Bible says that the sky was black. They couldn't see for many, many days. They fasted and they prayed. Eventually, they all made it safe to shore. Now, it's interesting when we study this passage, some of them, they all made it through shore, but some of them made it through better than others. Some of them escaped on pieces of the ship, others on broken boards, and they all made it safely, but some of them weathered the storm better than others. May I say this morning, everybody faces storms. God tells us we all face times of rain. We all face times where tempests rage in our life. Storms come into your life and my life not to destroy us, but for our betterment. And may I say, everybody goes through storms, but not everybody grows as a result of the storm. You see, God brings rain, he brings storm into your life and my life to help us to grow. But not everybody does grow. A few things storms do for us. Storms allow us to examine our direction. To whom are we headed? And with whom are we headed? Storms allow us to examine our dependencies. Who are you really depending on? Are you depending on your paycheck, or are you depending on God? Are you depending on your family, or are you depending on God? Are you depending on your own ability, or are you depending on God? You see, storms have a way of stripping away most of the things upon which we depend, and they allow us to examine our true dependencies. I'll give you an example briefly. A young couple may miscarry a child and allow the loss of that child to drive them closer to the Lord and to a greater dependence on God. And then another couple will miscarry a child just the same, and rather than depend upon God, become bitter with him and resentful towards him. What's the difference? Both families have faced a storm. Both families are facing trial. One responds by growing closer. The other responds by driving a wedge between them and God. It has been said that life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. So the point of our devotional today is this. You may be going through a storm. In fact, I know many in our class that are. They're facing a storm. Why don't I encourage you? It rains on everybody. Everybody faces storms of life. Storms are actually good for us. But the question is, are you drowning as a result of your storm? Or are you allowing the storm to ground you? There was a study done on trees. They took fruit-bearing trees, they planted some in an orchard, they planted others in a greenhouse, and they raised them together for years, separated by the greenhouse walls. When they were old enough, they took the trees, and they took the trees that had been in the greenhouse, and they moved them out to the field. What they found is that as soon as a storm came through, the winds blew over the trees that had been raised in the greenhouse. Upon further inspection, they realized that the trees that had been out in the orchard, the trees that had already been subjected to storms, their roots had grown deeper and broader to brace for the storm. The transplants from the greenhouse that had been sheltered, so to speak, from the elements, they didn't have the opportunity to deepen and broaden their roots, and so they were quickly overturned. Why don't I encourage you when a storm comes to not let it overturn you, but allow it to broaden your roots and deepen your dependence on God. This has been our Midweek Minute. We love you. We hope to see you tonight at 7.